Get your hands off me right now!
The words cut through the cabin like a blade. Security Officer Martinez froze his grip still tight on the arm of a young black woman in a charcoal hoodie. Around them, first-class passengers stopped mid-conversation. Phones came up. Cameras started rolling. What they didn't know was that in exactly 18 minutes, Zara Matthews would ground the entire SkyTech Airlines fleet. But first, she had to survive being dragged off her own plane. The Boeing 737 sat at Gate 23 of LaGuardia Airport like a sleeping giant. It was Tuesday, 2:45 p.m., and Flight 847 to Miami was supposed to push back in 20 minutes. The cabin hummed with the quiet efficiency of wealth, leather seats, gold trim, the kind of space where a single ticket cost more than most people's rent. Zara Matthews, 28 years old, sat perfectly still in seat 1A. Her oversized hoodie hid a frame worn thin by 72 hours of sleepless negotiations. Her jeans were designer but looked like thrift store finds. Her sneakers had seen better years. To everyone watching, she looked like exactly what they expected her to be. A mistake. They were wrong. Zara was the founder and CEO of NetVault Solutions, the cloud security empire that had made her $8 billion by her 28th birthday. That morning, she had completed the most audacious hostile takeover in aviation history. For $2.3 billion, she now owned SkyTech Airlines. Every plane, every gate, every employee trying to remove her from her own aircraft. Her private jet was grounded in London with engine trouble. She needed to be in Miami by 6 p.m. for the emergency board meeting that would announce her acquisition to the world. Flying commercial wasn't her choice. It was her only option. She should have flown first class under her real name, should have announced herself, should have walked onto the plane wearing the kind of power suit that made people step aside. Instead, she had chosen to see how SkyTech treated passengers who didn't look like they belonged. Now she knew. "Ma'am, I need you to gather your belongings and exit the aircraft." Security Officer Martinez stood over her, his hand still gripping her forearm. His nameplate read J. Martinez. Behind him stood Officer Johnson, a black man whose eyes kept darting between Zara's calm face and the crowd of passengers recording everything. On what grounds, Zara's voice was steady, quiet, the kind of calm that came from controlling billion-dollar boardrooms. Disruption of flight operations, Martinez said, failure to comply with crew instructions. A lie. Zara hadn't raised her voice, hadn't moved from her seat, hadn't done anything except exist while black in first class. The woman in seat 2A smiled. Victoria Castellanos, 45, looked like money had been her birthright. Designer everything. Hair that defied physics. Diamonds that caught the cabin lights like tiny stars. She clutched her purse closer and whispered to the flight attendant standing beside her. "Thank you for handling this quickly," Victoria said to Derek Walsh. "I simply can't fly with this kind of element in first class." Derek Walsh, 32, wore his SkyTech uniform like armor. 8 years of service. Clean record. Desperate to keep the passengers who mattered happy. In his mind, the calculation was simple. Victoria Castellanos flew first class 40 times a year, spent 6 figures annually with SkyTech, had connections to board members. The woman in the hoodie, probably an upgrade mistake, maybe a non-revenue employee using a buddy pass, someone who didn't matter. Ma'am Derek said to Zara, "If you cooperate, we can find you a seat in Economy Plus. You'll be much more comfortable there." Zara looked up at him. "I paid $3,200 for this seat. I have a confirmed reservation. I'm not moving." "The ticket could be fraudulent," Derek said. "We see this all the time." Behind them, passengers whispered. A businessman in 3C shook his head. A woman in 4A pulled out her phone. Someone muttered about delayed departures. No one stood up for her. Captain James Rodriguez emerged from the cockpit. 20 years of flying. Veteran of 1,000 difficult passengers. He took one look at the scene and made his assessment. Young black woman, expensive cabin, wealthy passengers complaining, security already involved. In his experience, the path of least resistance was obvious. "Miss, I'm Captain Rodriguez. We can't delay this flight any longer. If you'll just gather your things and follow these officers, we can resolve this quickly." Zara didn't move. "Captain, I'd like to see the passenger manifest. I'd like to know what rule I've violated, and I'd like to know why I'm being removed when the woman who started this confrontation gets to stay." Captain Rodriguez glanced at Victoria, who was now settling into seat 1A like she owned it, which in every way that mattered to the crew she did. "Ma'am, we have a schedule to maintain. Other passengers are waiting." "Other passengers?" Zara repeated. "Not all passengers, just the ones who look like they belong." The cabin fell silent. Officer Johnson shifted uncomfortably. He had been a cop for 15 years before joining airport security. He knew what discrimination looked like. This felt wrong. The woman hadn't done anything, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't made a scene. But his partner was already moving. Martinez reached for Zara's bag in the overhead compartment. "Don't touch my property," Zara said. She stood slowly, every movement deliberate. "If you're removing me, I'll get my own bag." "Ma'am, for security reasons." "What security reasons?" The voice came from seat 3B. Maya Rodriguez, 24. Hispanic traveling to Miami for her sister's wedding. She had been filming since the confrontation started. She's been sitting quietly this entire time. "Turn off that device," Derek snapped. "This is a private matter." Private Maya's voice rose. "You're forcibly removing a paying passenger. This is public as it gets." Her Instagram live stream showed 847 viewers, growing by the second. Kevin O'Brien in seat 2C held up his phone. The TikTok recording showed 1,200 viewers. Comments flooded in faster than he could read them. "This is discrimination. Sue them all. Someone call a lawyer. This is insane." Derek noticed the cameras. "All recording devices need to be turned off immediately. This is interfering with security operations." "You can't stop us from filming," Kevin said. "This is a public space." Zara reached into her pocket and pulled out a sleek black satellite phone, the kind that cost more than Derek's monthly salary. Emergency legal documentation required, she said into the phone. "LaGuardia Airport Gate 23 Skytech Flight 847. Derek's hand shot out and grabbed the phone. No devices during security procedures. The moment Derek's fingers closed around Zara's phone, everything changed. Physical contact, seizure of property, federal crimes happening in real time. Zara looked directly into Maya's camera. "Everyone watching this, remember what you're seeing. Remember who chose to allow this. Remember that in America in 2024, a woman can still be removed from a plane for the crime of existing while black." Officer Johnson stepped back. "Martinez, maybe we should—" "Ma'am, you need to come with us now." Martinez's grip tightened on Zara's arm. For the first time, Zara smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just watched their enemies destroy themselves. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll go." As they escorted her down the aisle past the recording phones and the whispered conversations and the guilty faces of people who had chosen silence over justice, Zara spoke one more time. "To everyone filming this, thank you. Truth needs witnesses, and sometimes justice needs to see how far people will go before they finally do the right thing." The jetway door closed behind them with a soft click. Victoria Castellanos settled into seat 1A, adjusting the headrest like a queen claiming her throne. Derek Walsh straightened his tie and tried to forget the look in Zara's eyes. Captain Rodriguez returned to the cockpit, already composing the incident report in his head. None of them knew they had just committed career suicide, because Zara Matthews wasn't just any passenger. She was their new boss, and in 17 minutes and counting, she was going to remind them exactly what accountability looked like. The countdown had begun. Zara Matthews had built her empire on a simple principle: never let them see you coming. At NYU, while her classmates were pledging sororities and posting party photos, Zara was coding in the basement of her dorm. She lived on instant noodles and coffee, writing the algorithms that would become NetVault's revolutionary cloud security platform. Her professors called her obsessed. Her roommate called her antisocial. The venture capitalists called her a gold mine. By 22, she had turned her dorm room startup into a $500 million company. By 25, she had gone public and watched her valuation soar past $3 billion. By 28, NetVault Solutions was protecting the data of Fortune 500 companies worldwide, and Zara Matthews was worth more money than most small countries. But money hadn't bought her acceptance. In Silicon Valley boardrooms, she was still the young black woman who didn't fit the culture. Investors praised her technical skills but questioned her leadership potential. Competitors dismissed her as a diversity hire who had gotten lucky. Zara learned to use their assumptions against them. She dressed down for meetings, letting them underestimate her before revealing the depth of her knowledge. She spoke softly, forcing them to lean in to hear billion-dollar ideas. She never announced her wealth, preferring to let her results speak for themselves. Stealth wealth became her superpower. And today, it was about to expose an entire industry. The SkyTech acquisition had been personal. 3 months ago, a viral video showed a black family being dragged off a SkyTech flight because a gate agent didn't believe their first-class tickets were real. The family's 8-year-old daughter had cried as security officers manhandled her father. The airline's response was predictable. Isolated incident. Retraining. We're committed to doing better. Zara had watched the video 17 times. Each time she saw herself in that little girl's tears. Each time she remembered every boardroom where she had been questioned, dismissed, or ignored. So she bought the airline. It took 3 months of careful stock accumulation. Shell companies. Offshore trusts. Legal maneuvers that kept her identity hidden until the moment she controlled enough shares to call an emergency board meeting. By the time SkyTech's executives realized what was happening, it was too late. This morning's signing had been a formality. The real test was happening right now on Flight 847, where nobody knew who she was. She was about to find out how SkyTech really treated passengers who looked like her. LaGuardia Airport on a Tuesday afternoon was controlled chaos. Delayed flights created crowds of frustrated travelers. Overworked gate agents dealt with endless complaints. Security lines snaked around corners. The kind of place where patients went to die. Gate 23 hummed with the quiet efficiency of first-class boarding. Brad Murphy, 26, scanned boarding passes with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this dance 1,000 times. Suit and tie meant quick scan and smile. Designer purse meant welcome aboard. Wedding rings and Rolex watches meant expedited processing. Then Zara approached his podium. Brad's eyes swept her from head to toe. Oversized hoodie that had seen better days. Jeans that looked like they came from a discount store. Sneakers with scuffed edges. No visible jewelry. No designer anything. A young black woman who clearly didn't belong in the priority boarding line. "Ma'am, this is first-class boarding," Brad said without looking up from his screen. Zara held up her phone. "I know." Brad scanned the barcode. The machine beeped green. Seat 1A appeared on his screen. His eyebrows knitted together. "There might be a ticketing error," he said, scanning again. Same result. "Are you sure you didn't book economy and get upgraded by mistake? I booked first class," Zara said evenly. "Seat 1A, paid full fare." Brad stared at his screen. The ticket was valid. Payment confirmed. No flags or alerts. But his brain couldn't reconcile what he was seeing with what he expected. Young black women in hoodies didn't pay $200 for first-class tickets. There had to be an explanation. "Can I see some additional ID?" he asked. Credit card you used to purchase? Behind Zara, a line was forming. A businessman in a Tom Ford suit tapped his Apple Watch impatiently. A woman in designer everything sighed loudly. They had been waved through without question. Zara pulled out her passport and a black Amex Centurion card, the kind that required a net worth of at least $10 million to obtain. Brad examined both documents. Everything matched, but his training said one thing and his assumptions said another. "Ma'am, I'm seeing some irregularities in the system. Let me call my supervisor." "What irregularities?" Zara asked. Brad couldn't answer honestly. The irregularity was that she didn't look like she belonged. But you couldn't say that. You had to find policy reasons. Technical reasons. Anything except the real reason. "Computer glitch," he said finally. "Happens sometimes with certain types of bookings." The businessman behind them cleared his throat. "Is there a problem here?" "Just a moment, sir," Brad said. He picked up his desk phone and dialed gate services. "Yeah, it's Brad at 23. I've got a questionable first-class ticket here. Young black female dressed casually. Ticket appears valid, but something feels off." Zara heard every word. She had expected this. In her world of billion-dollar negotiations, she had learned that the first move in any power game was to make your opponent reveal their true nature. Brad was revealing his. "Supervisor says to let you through," he said, finally handing back her documents. "But they'll be checking on the situation." "Thank you," Zara said. She walked down the jetway, leaving Brad to process the next passenger, a white man in a rumpled business suit who got waved through without question. The Boeing 737's first-class cabin was SkyTech's crown jewel. Leather seats wide enough to sleep in. Personal entertainment systems. Enough legroom for someone 6 feet tall to stretch completely. Gold trim caught the LED lighting. The carpet was thick enough to muffle footsteps. Zara found seat 1A and settled in. She pulled her noise-canceling headphones over her ears and closed her eyes. After 72 hours of negotiations, conference calls, and lawyers arguing over contractual details, she just wanted silence. She got 3 minutes. A sharp tap on her shoulder made her eyes snap open. Standing over her was Derek Walsh, the flight attendant she had seen checking manifest papers at the galley. Behind him stood a woman who looked like money had been her birthright. Victoria Castellanos had the kind of beauty that required a full-time staff. Hair extensions that cost more than most cars. Makeup applied by professionals. A leopard print coat that screamed for attention. Diamond rings that caught the cabin lights like tiny disco balls. She also had the kind of entitlement that came from never hearing the word no. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're in my seat." Zara looked at her phone. The boarding pass clearly showed 1A. "I don't think so. This is my assigned seat." "Impossible," Victoria snapped. She turned to Derek with the confidence of someone accustomed to service staff solving her problems. "I always sit in 1A. Always. My late husband was Platinum Elite for 30 years. I have medical documentation requiring the bulkhead seat for my claustrophobia." Derek looked between the two women. Victoria Castellanos was a name he recognized from the VIP passenger list. She flew first class 43 times last year, spent $127,000 with SkyTech annually, had connections to 3 board members. The young woman in the hoodie was nobody he knew. "Ma'am," Derek said to Zara, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining simple concepts to a confused child. There might have been a booking error. "Mrs. Castellanos has special accommodations that require the bulkhead seat." "What accommodations?" Zara asked. "Medical," Victoria said quickly. "Severe claustrophobia. Any seat except 1A triggers panic attacks. It's documented with the airline." Zara turned in her seat to face Victoria directly. "If you have documented medical needs, shouldn't the airline have accommodated you when you booked?" instead of expecting other passengers to give up their confirmed seats. Victoria's face flushed red. I don't think someone like you understands how first-class service works. Someone like me. Young people these days, Victoria said, but her eyes said something different. No respect for their elders, no understanding of airline protocols. Derek could feel the tension building. Other passengers were starting to notice. The businessman in 2C had lowered his newspaper. A woman in 3A was openly staring. Ma'am, Derek said to Zara to avoid any confusion, I can reseat you in Economy Plus. It has extra legroom and premium service. We'll refund the fare difference. I don't want a refund, Zara said calmly. I want the seat I paid for. Sometimes flexibility is appreciated, Derek said, especially when other passengers have special circumstances. Zara looked at him steadily. And what are my special circumstances? Derek faltered. He couldn't say what he was thinking. Couldn't admit that his decision was based entirely on appearance. Couldn't acknowledge that he was choosing Victoria because she looked like someone who mattered. Well, Mrs. Castellanos is a valued frequent flyer. And I'm not... I didn't say that, but you implied it. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Listen, sweetheart. I don't know how you got that ticket, but this seat isn't for people like you. This is first class. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the back of the plane where you belong. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Zara felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, something colder, more controlled. The feeling she got in boardrooms when competitors revealed their true nature. Mrs. Castellanos. Zara said quietly, I think you should be very careful about what you say next. Victoria laughed. Or what you'll call your lawyer sue me. I've got more money than you'll ever see, little girl. Zara smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. We'll see about that. Derek sensed the conversation spiraling beyond his control. He needed to regain authority before this became a scene that affected other passengers. Ladies, I'm going to ask both of you to lower your voices. Mrs. Castellanos, if you'll take seat 2A temporarily, I'll speak with the captain about resolving this. I'm not taking 2A, Victoria snapped. I'm taking 1A. She can move or get off the plane, Ma'am, Derek said to Zara. I really need you to be flexible here. I am being flexible, Zara said. I'm sitting quietly in the seat I paid for, not demanding that other passengers move to accommodate me. Derek felt sweat building under his collar. The situation was escalating, and he was losing control. He could call the captain, but that would delay the flight. He could call security, but that seemed extreme for a seating dispute. Or he could do what airlines trained their staff to do in situations like this. Remove the passenger who seemed like less trouble to remove. The passenger who looked like they didn't belong anyway. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and speak with gate services about alternative arrangements. Zara didn't move. On what grounds disruption of operations? Failure to comply with crew instructions. What instructions have I failed to follow? Derek paused. She had followed every instruction. She had been polite, calm, reasonable. She hadn't raised her voice or made demands. She had simply refused to give up the seat she had paid for. But the flight needed to leave. Victoria Castellanos needed to be happy, and the young woman in the hoodie needed to learn that some spaces weren't for people like her. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate voluntarily, I'll have to call airport security. Zara looked around the cabin. Other passengers were watching now, some uncomfortably shifting in their seats, others with the fascination of people watching someone else's misfortune. None of them spoke up. Call security, Zara said quietly. I'd like this documented. Derek reached for the interphone. As he dialed, he felt a small satisfaction. The young woman had pushed too far. Now she would learn how things really worked. He had no idea he was about to learn the same lesson. Captain Miller, This is Derek in first class. We have a situation developing. Derek Walsh spoke into the interphone with the confidence of 8 years of service. Behind him, Victoria Castellanos had already moved into seat 1A, arranging her coat and purse like a queen claiming her throne. She smiled at Derek with the satisfaction of someone accustomed to getting her way. Zara remained in the aisle, standing perfectly still. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her expression was calm. To any objective observer, she was the only person in first class who wasn't causing a disturbance. But objective observation wasn't what was happening here. What kind of situation? Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. Derek glanced at Zara, then lowered his voice. Passenger in 1A refusing to comply with reseating instructions. She's being difficult. Medical emergency. No, sir. Seating dispute. Mrs. Castellanos has documented medical needs for the bulkhead, but the other passenger won't move. Captain Rodriguez sighed. 20 years of flying had taught him that seating disputes were like cancer. They started small and spread fast. The longer they lasted, the more they disrupted operations. Is the passenger being disruptive? Derek looked at Zara again. She was standing quietly, not speaking, not moving, not doing anything that could objectively be called disruptive. But she was disrupting the natural order of things. The order that said people like Victoria Castellanos got what they wanted, and people like the woman in the hoodie learned their place. She's refusing crew instructions, sir, creating tension among other passengers. It was technically true. Her refusal to move was creating tension. The fact that the tension came from other people's reactions to her presence wasn't mentioned. I'll be right out. Derek hung up with satisfaction. Captain Rodriguez was old school, military background, understood chain of command and passenger compliance. He would handle this quickly and professionally. Victoria leaned over from seat 1A. Thank you, Derek. I knew you'd handle this appropriately. Some people just don't understand airline protocols. Of course, Mrs. Castellanos. We appreciate your patience. Zara watched the exchange without comment. In her world of corporate mergers and billion-dollar negotiations, she had learned to recognize the language of power. Who had it, who wanted it, and who was about to lose it. Derek had just revealed which category he belonged in. Captain James Rodriguez emerged from the cockpit with the bearing of someone accustomed to being the final authority. 20 years with SkyTech, former Air Force. The kind of pilot who could land in a hurricane and make it look routine. He assessed the situation with military efficiency. Well-dressed Hispanic woman in seat 1A, clearly where she belonged. Young black woman standing in the aisle, obviously where she didn't belong. Flight attendant looking frustrated. Other passengers watching nervously. The solution seemed obvious. Ladies, I'm Captain Rodriguez. I understand there's been a seating confusion. No confusion, Captain Zara said. I have seat 1A. This woman wants seat 1A. That's not confusion. That's attempted theft. Victoria gasped. Theft? How dare you? I've been flying SkyTech for 30 years. My late husband was Platinum Elite. I have medical documentation. Mrs. Castellanos. Captain Rodriguez said smoothly, Please let me handle this. He turned to Zara with the tone he used for difficult passengers. Firm but reasonable. Authoritative but not threatening. Miss, I need to see your boarding pass and ID. Zara handed them over without comment. Captain Rodriguez examined both documents carefully. Everything was legitimate. The ticket was valid, the payment confirmed the seat assignment clear. But legitimacy wasn't the only factor in decisions like this. The ticket appears valid, he said. But Mrs. Castellanos has special medical accommodations that require the bulkhead seat. These accommodations take priority over standard seating assignments. Can I see the medical documentation? Zara asked. That's confidential medical information, Victoria snapped. If it's being used to remove me from my confirmed seat, I have a right to see the justification. Captain Rodriguez felt the situation slipping beyond simple solutions. The young woman was asking reasonable questions, making logical points. But logic wasn't always the priority in airline operations. Customer relations was. Miss, to avoid any further delay, I'm asking you to take the seat we're offering in Economy Plus. It's a fair accommodation. Fair for whom Zara asked. Fair for the passenger who gets to keep the seat she didn't pay for. Or fair for the passenger who loses the seat she did pay for. It's fair for all passengers who want to depart on time, including the passenger being removed for no legitimate reason. Captain Rodriguez felt his patience thinning. He had been doing this for 20 years. He knew how to handle difficult passengers. The key was maintaining authority while offering face-saving alternatives. Miss, I'm trying to work with you here. We can resolve this quickly if you'll just be flexible. I am being flexible, Zara said. I'm sitting quietly in my assigned seat while another passenger demands that I move to accommodate her preference. How much more flexible should I be? Behind them, passengers were becoming restless. The businessman in 2C checked his watch loudly. Someone in row 4 muttered about delays. The woman in 3A was openly filming with her phone. Captain Rodriguez made his decision. Miss, I'm going to ask you one more time to accept our accommodation. If you continue to refuse, I'll have no choice but to call security to remove you for disrupting flight operations. Zara looked at him steadily. What operations have I disrupted? You're preventing departure by sitting in my assigned seat, by refusing to comply with crew instructions. Instructions to give up my paid seat to accommodate another passenger's preference. Instructions to accept reasonable alternative arrangements. Zara nodded slowly. I see. So if I understand correctly, I'm being threatened with removal because I won't voluntarily give up something I paid for to make another passenger happy. You're being asked to show flexibility in a difficult situation. And if I don't show this flexibility, then we'll have to resolve this through other means. Captain Rodriguez picked up the interphone. Gate services. This is Captain Rodriguez on Flight 847. I need security to Gate 23 for passenger removal. Non-violent but non-compliant. Zara felt the familiar calm that came over her in moments of crisis. In corporate negotiations, this was the moment when opponents revealed their true position. When the polite language fell away and raw power took its place. Captain, she said quietly, I want you to be very clear about what you're doing. You're calling security to remove a paying passenger who has broken no rules, violated no policies, and caused no disturbance. You're doing this to accommodate another passenger's demand for a seat she didn't pay for. Is that an accurate summary? Captain Rodriguez hesitated. When she put it like that, it sounded wrong. But he had already committed to this course of action. Backing down now would undermine his authority. You're being removed for failure to comply with crew instructions. What instructions to accept alternative seating arrangements? And if I had been a white woman in a business suit, would you have given me the same instructions? The question hung in the air like toxic gas. Captain Rodriguez felt every eye in first class focused on him. The phones recording, the passengers listening, the flight attendant waiting for his response. He couldn't answer honestly. The honest answer was no. A white woman in a business suit would never have been questioned, never have been asked to move, never have been threatened with removal. But he couldn't say that. This has nothing to do with race, he said finally. Then what does it have to do with Captain Rodriguez felt trapped? He had started down this path and couldn't turn back without admitting error, without acknowledging that his decision was based on assumptions and appearances rather than rules and policies. Security will be here momentarily, he said, and retreated to the cockpit. Victoria Castellanos settled deeper into seat 1A with the satisfaction of victory. She had seen this dance before. Young people trying to take what didn't belong to them. Airlines rightfully protecting their real customers. "Thank you, Captain," she called after Rodriguez. "Some people just don't understand how things work in first class." She turned to Zara with undisguised contempt. "Honey, you're about to learn a very expensive lesson. This isn't the bus. This isn't coach. This is first class, and first class has standards." Zara looked at her calmly. "What standards are those standards of behavior? Standards of dress? Standards of appropriateness? Whose standards? The airline's standards. The standards of passengers who actually belong here." "And you determine who belongs." Victoria laughed. "I don't have to determine anything. It's obvious. Look at yourself. Look at me. One of us clearly belongs in first class. One of us clearly doesn't." Derek Walsh nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of clarity the situation needed. Mrs. Castellanos understood how things worked. She understood the natural order of airline hierarchy. "Mrs. Castellanos is one of our most valued customers," he said to Zara. "She flies over 40,000 miles annually with SkyTech. Her loyalty deserves recognition. And my payment doesn't deserve recognition." "Your payment." Derek paused. He was about to say that her payment was probably fraudulent anyway, that people like her didn't legitimately buy first-class tickets, that there must be some explanation, stolen credit card, employee pass abuse, computer error that would make sense of the situation. But saying that out loud would be admitting the real reason for his decision. "Your payment is appreciated," he said finally, "but customer service sometimes requires flexibility." "Flexibility from whom?" "From all passengers." "Have you asked Mrs. Castellanos to be flexible?" Derek glanced at Victoria, who was examining her manicure with the boredom of someone watching a predictable outcome. "Mrs. Castellanos has medical documentation requiring the bulkhead seat." "Can I see it?" "That's confidential. But it's being used to justify removing me from my seat." "Yes. So I'm supposed to accept medical documentation I'm not allowed to see as justification for losing something I paid for." Derek felt his frustration building. The young woman was making this much more complicated than it needed to be. She was asking questions that didn't have good answers, making points that were hard to refute. Why couldn't she just understand her place and move to the back where she belonged? "Ma'am, security will be here soon. I strongly encourage you to accept our alternative arrangements before this becomes a bigger issue." Zara reached into her pocket and pulled out her satellite phone. The device looked like it belonged on a military base or in a Fortune 500 boardroom. Definitely not in the hands of someone who couldn't afford first class. Derek noticed but didn't process the implication. "I need to make a call," Zara said. "Ma'am, you can't use devices during what I'm not on the plane. You're removing me from the plane, so I'm not subject to in-flight communication restrictions." She dialed a number from memory. "Marcus, it's Zara. I need emergency legal documentation for a civil rights violation in progress." Derek's hand shot out. "Ma'am, I need you to end that call. Why security protocols? What security protocols apply to a passenger you're removing from the aircraft?" Derek grabbed for the phone. "Ma'am, I'm confiscating this device." The moment Derek's fingers closed around Zara's satellite phone, several things happened at once. Every passenger in first class turned to stare. The phones recording the incident captured the exact moment of physical contact, and Zara's expression shifted from calm patience to cold calculation. "You just committed assault," she said quietly. "And theft. On camera. With witnesses." Derek realized he had crossed a line, but he couldn't back down now. Not with Mrs. Castellanos watching. Not with the captain expecting resolution. Not with his authority on the line. "I'm following security protocols for disruptive passengers. What disruption have I caused? Failure to comply with lawful crew instructions. What lawful instruction have I failed to follow?" Derek paused. The instruction to give up her seat wasn't actually lawful. Airlines could move passengers for operational reasons, but not to accommodate other passengers' preferences. The instruction to end her phone call wasn't lawful either. She wasn't on the aircraft anymore, so in-flight communication rules didn't apply. But admitting that would mean admitting error, would mean acknowledging that everything he had done was wrong. "Ma'am, security will explain the situation when they arrive. Security, Zara said, will see exactly what happened here. They'll see that I was assaulted and robbed by airline personnel for the crime of sitting in a seat I paid for." She looked around the cabin at the passengers watching and recording. "Everyone here will see it too. And when this goes viral, and it will go viral, everyone will remember that SkyTech Airlines removes black passengers to make white passengers comfortable." Victoria Castellanos shifted uncomfortably. The word viral had an ominous ring to it. Social media could be unpredictable. Sometimes these situations got blown out of proportion. "Now wait just a minute," she said. "This isn't about race. This is about medical accommodations. Medical accommodations you can't document. I don't have to prove anything to you. But the airline has to prove something to me if they want to remove me from a seat I paid for." Derek checked his watch. Security should be here any moment. Once they arrived, this would become their problem. All he had to do was maintain control until then. He had no idea that control had already slipped through his fingers. Because Zara Matthews wasn't just any passenger. She was their boss, and she was about to teach everyone in first class what accountability actually looked like. The countdown had reached single digits. "Security to Gate 23. Priority response requested." The announcement echoed through LaGuardia's Terminal C as two airport security officers made their way through the crowds of delayed passengers. Officer Marcus Johnson, 34, adjusted his radio as he walked. 15 years as NYPD before transitioning to airport security, he had seen every kind of disturbance airports could produce. Behind him, Officer Janet Martinez, 29, checked her body camera. 5 years of security work had taught her that difficult passenger situations could escalate fast. Better to have everything documented. "What do we know about this one?" Johnson asked. Gate services called it in. First-class seating dispute. Passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. Non-violent but uncooperative. Johnson nodded. These calls were routine, usually ended with someone accepting a voucher and taking a later flight. Occasionally required a firm conversation about airline policies. Rarely required actual force. They reached Gate 23 expecting a standard situation. What they found was a powder keg about to explode. Inside the aircraft, Maya Rodriguez had been live streaming for 12 minutes. Her Instagram followers had grown from the usual 50 to over 3,000. The comments section was exploding faster than she could read. "This is absolutely insane," she whispered into her phone camera. "They're literally removing a woman for sitting in her own seat. This is 2024, people. This is America." The live stream showed Zara standing calmly in the first-class aisle, while Derek Walsh clutched her confiscated phone. Victoria Castellanos had spread her belongings across Seat 1A like a conquering army claiming territory. Maya's comment section was on fire. "Sue them for everything. This is straight-up discrimination. Where's the NAACP when you need them? Film everything. Post this everywhere." Kevin O'Brien in Seat 2C had switched from TikTok to Twitter, posting real-time updates with photos. His thread was being retweeted faster than he could track. Thread watching SkyTech. Air, remove black passenger from first class to accommodate white passenger. 1 of 12 passenger has valid ticket, paid full fare, broke no rules. Being removed anyway. 2 of 12. Flight attendant physically took her phone when she tried to call lawyer. 3 of 12. Captain threatened her with arrest for sitting in seat. She paid for 4 of 12. The hashtag SkyTech discrimination was already trending in New York. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a white civil rights attorney in seat 4B, had been recording since the confrontation started. As a lawyer, she recognized the legal implications unfolding in real time. "This is textbook discrimination," she muttered to her seat companion. "They have no grounds for removal." None. She opened her phone and started typing a Twitter thread of her own. "As a civil rights attorney, I'm watching SkyTech Air violate federal law in real time. Passenger being removed for DWB driving, while black but 30,000 feet up." The viral momentum was building, but the real explosion was still coming. Security officers Johnson and Martinez boarded the aircraft to find a scene that immediately felt wrong. Johnson's police instincts kicked in as he assessed the situation. First-class cabin, wealthy passengers, everyone comfortable except one young black woman standing in the aisle. Every eye in the cabin focused on her, phones recording from multiple angles. His partner Martinez checked her notes. "Flight attendant says she's being disruptive and refusing to comply." Johnson looked at the woman in question. Zara stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her, expression calm. She wasn't yelling, wasn't arguing, wasn't doing anything that looked disruptive. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Johnson. Can you tell me what's happening here?" Zara's voice was steady. "I boarded the aircraft with a valid first-class ticket for seat 1A. Another passenger wanted that seat. The flight attendant demanded I move to accommodate her. When I refused to give up the seat I paid for, they called you to remove me." Johnson glanced at Derek Walsh. "Is that accurate?" Derek shifted uncomfortably. "She's refusing crew instructions, creating a disturbance among other passengers. What instructions to accept alternative seating arrangements? And why does she need alternative arrangements?" Derek looked toward Victoria Castellanos, who was watching the exchange with obvious annoyance. "Mrs. Castellanos has medical documentation requiring the bulkhead seat. Can I see that documentation?" Johnson asked. Victoria's face flushed. "That's private medical information. I don't have to show it to security. If it's being used to justify removing another passenger, I need to verify it exists." "I have claustrophobia," Victoria said quickly. "Severe claustrophobia. Any seat except 1A triggers panic attacks." Johnson looked around the spacious first-class cabin. Every seat had the same amount of space, the same legroom. The bulkhead didn't provide any additional room. If anything, it restricted it. "Ma'am, claustrophobia would usually require more space, not less. The bulkhead seat actually has restricted legroom due to the wall." Victoria's face went redder. "You're not a doctor. You don't understand my condition." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Sir, we have a boarding pass dispute. One passenger has documentation, the other claims medical priority but can't provide verification." Johnson had been a cop long enough to recognize what he was seeing. This wasn't about medical accommodations or seating disputes. This was about two passengers who looked different and assumptions about which one deserved priority. "Flight attendant. What's your name?" "Derek Walsh. 8 years with SkyTech." Derek walked me through the sequence of events. Derek recounted his version carefully. Mrs. Castellanos had special accommodations. The other passenger was being inflexible. The situation was causing delays. What he didn't mention were the real reasons for his decisions, the assumptions about who belonged where, the calculations about which passenger mattered more. Johnson turned to Zara. "Ma'am, did you refuse any specific safety instructions?" "No. I was told to move seats to accommodate another passenger's preference." "That's not a safety instruction. Did you threaten anyone or use abusive language?" "No. Did you interfere with crew duties or aircraft operations?" "No. I sat in my assigned seat and remained quiet until they physically took my phone." Johnson looked at Derek. "You confiscated her phone security protocols for disruptive passengers. What made her disruptive?" Derek faltered. The honest answer was that she had been disruptive to the assumptions about who belonged in first class. But that wasn't something he could say. She was uncooperative. Uncooperative how? She refused to accept alternative arrangements. Johnson had heard enough. 15 years of police work had taught him to recognize discrimination when he saw it. This situation stank of it. "Ma'am," he said to Zara, "do you want to press charges for theft of property?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Derek's face went white. "Theft. I was following security protocols. Confiscating personal property without legal justification is theft, regardless of your uniform." Maya Rodriguez nearly dropped her phone. The live stream comments exploded. "Officer just said the attendant committed theft. This is getting real. Security is calling out the airline." Finally, someone with sense. Johnson continued. "Ma'am, I see no evidence that you've violated any laws or airline policies. I see evidence that you've been discriminated against based on appearance." Victoria Castellanos shot to her feet. "This is outrageous. I have been flying SkyTech for 30 years. I know the CEO personally. Ma'am, knowing the CEO doesn't give you the right to demand other passengers' seats. I have medical documentation, which you've refused to provide." Johnson turned back to Derek. "Flight attendant, I'm going to ask you directly. If this passenger had been a white woman in a business suit, would you have asked her to move?" The question everyone had been thinking, but no one had asked. Derek looked around the cabin, at the cameras recording, at the passengers listening, at Victoria glaring at him expectantly, at Captain Rodriguez watching from the cockpit door. He couldn't answer honestly without admitting discrimination. He couldn't lie convincingly with so many witnesses. "I treat all passengers equally," he said finally. "That's not what I asked," Johnson pressed. "Would you have asked a white woman in a business suit to give up her paid seat to accommodate another passenger's preference?" Derek's silence was answer enough. Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Sir, I think we need to de-escalate this situation. The passenger has done nothing wrong. She should be allowed to keep her seat." Captain Rodriguez emerged from the cockpit, his face tight with frustration. 20 years of flying, and he had never had security officers question his crew's decisions. "Officers, I appreciate your input, but this is an airline matter. We have policies for handling difficult passengers." "Captain, what specific policy justifies removing a passenger from a seat they paid for?" Rodriguez felt the ground shifting beneath him. When he had called security, he expected them to remove the disruptive passenger quietly and efficiently. He hadn't expected them to start investigating his crew's decisions. The passenger was being uncooperative with crew instructions. Instructions to give up her seat to another passenger. Instructions to accept reasonable accommodations. Johnson looked around the first-class cabin. "Captain, I've been in law enforcement for 20 years. This looks like discrimination to me." "That's a serious accusation, officer." "Yes, it is, and it's being broadcast live on social media right now." For the first time, Captain Rodriguez noticed the phones. Multiple passengers recording, comments streaming, hashtags trending. This was no longer a simple passenger removal. This was a public relations nightmare happening in real time. "Officers," he said carefully, "what do you recommend?" Johnson looked at Zara, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. "Ma'am, this is your call. You have a valid ticket for seat 1A. You've broken no laws or policies. You can stay in your seat, or you can accept alternative arrangements, or you can file complaints with the DOT and FBI." Maya Rodriguez held her breath. Her live stream had reached 8,000 viewers. The comment section was unanimously supporting Zara. Kevin O'Brien's Twitter thread had been retweeted 15,000 times in the last 10 minutes. Dr. Walsh was already drafting the civil rights lawsuit in her head. Victoria Castellanos was realizing that her entitled demand might have created a viral disaster. Derek Walsh was calculating whether his airline career was over. Captain Rodriguez was wondering how a simple seating dispute had turned into a federal civil rights incident. and Zara Matthews was deciding whether it was time to reveal who she really was. The countdown had reached 0. The moment of truth had arrived. But before anyone could speak, Zara's confiscated satellite phone began to ring. The caller ID on the screen showed a name that would change everything: Marcus Rivera, Chief Legal Counsel, NetVault Solutions. Derek stared at the phone in his hand. NetVault Solutions. He knew that name. Everyone in business knew that name. $8 billion tech company, government contracts, Fortune 500 security services. What was their chief legal counsel doing calling a passenger in a hoodie? Zara smiled for the first time since boarding the plane. It wasn't a happy smile. "Derek," she said quietly, "I think you should answer that call." The satellite phone's ringtone cut through the cabin like a blade. Derek Walsh stared at the device in his hands, reading the caller ID over and over. Marcus Rivera, Chief Legal Counsel, NetVault Solutions. NetVault Solutions, the company that secured data for half the Fortune 500, the company that held government contracts worth billions, the company whose CEO was... Derek's blood turned to ice. "Answer it," Zara said quietly. Around the cabin, passengers held their breath. Maya's live stream had reached 12,000 viewers. Kevin's Twitter thread was being retweeted every few seconds. The hashtag #SkyTechDiscrimination was trending nationwide. Derek's hand trembled as he lifted the phone to his ear. Hello, who is this?" The voice was sharp, professional, dangerous. "This is Derek Walsh, flight attendant with SkyTech Airlines." "Flight attendant. Why are you answering Ms. Matthews' phone?" Derek looked at Zara. Matthews. The name hit him like a freight train. Matthews, as in Zara Matthews, as in the founder and CEO of NetVault Solutions, as in one of the youngest billionaires in America. We confiscated the phone during a security situation." "You confiscated the phone of the CEO of NetVault Solutions." The words echoed through the first-class cabin. Every conversation stopped. Every phone turned toward Zara. "Did you just say CEO?" Maya whispered into her live stream. "Did he just say billionaire CEO?" Derek's face had gone completely white. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. "Sir, there must be some mistake. There's definitely a mistake." Marcus Rivera's voice carried through the cabin speaker. "The mistake was touching my client. The mistake was confiscating her property. The mistake was discriminating against her based on appearance." "We didn't discriminate. You just what?" "Removed a paying passenger to accommodate someone else's preference." "That's textbook discrimination." Victoria Castellanos slowly sank into seat 1A as the reality hit her. She had just stolen the seat of a billionaire, on camera, with thousands of witnesses. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "Sir, this is Captain Rodriguez. There must be some misunderstanding. Captain, my client just texted me the live stream links. I'm watching this happen in real time, along with 16,000 other people." Officer Johnson looked at Zara with new understanding. "Ma'am, are you really Zara Matthews, the NetVault CEO?" Zara nodded calmly. "I am." The cabin erupted in whispers. Phones turned toward her from every direction. Maya's Instagram Live comments exploded. "Holy shit, she's a billionaire. They just discriminated against a CEO. This is insane. Someone's getting fired." Derek felt his knees go weak. He had just committed assault and theft against one of the most powerful people in America, on camera, with thousands of witnesses. "Ms. Matthews?" he stammered. "I didn't know. If I had known who you were..." Zara's eyes turned cold. "If you had known who I was, what? You would have treated me with basic human respect. You would have followed airline policies instead of making assumptions based on my appearance. Yes. No. I mean, You mean you would have treated me differently if you knew I was rich? Which means you treated me badly because you thought I was poor." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Ms. Matthews, I need to ask directly. Do you want to press charges?" Before Zara could answer, her phone rang again. Derek fumbled to hand it to her. "This is Zara. Ms. Matthews. This is James Patterson, Skytech's chief legal counsel. I just received word about the situation. I want to personally apologize and assure you that we'll resolve this immediately." Zara put the phone on speaker. Patterson's voice filled the cabin. "Mr. Patterson," she said clearly, "I appreciate the call, but I think there's something you should know before we discuss resolution." "Anything you need, Miss Matthews. Skytech values your business." "Mr. Patterson, as of this morning, I don't just value Skytech's business. I own it." Silence. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" "This morning I completed a $2.3 billion acquisition of Skytech Airlines. I am now the majority shareholder and CEO of this company." The words hit the cabin like a nuclear bomb. Derek Walsh dropped to his knees. Victoria Castellanos made a sound like air escaping from a punctured tire. Captain Rodriguez grabbed the nearest seat for support. Maya Rodriguez screamed into her live stream, "She owns the airline. The woman they discriminated against owns the entire airline." Kevin O'Brien's fingers flew over his phone. Breaking Skytech CEO dragged off her own plane by her own employees. This is the biggest story of the year. Dr. Walsh was already mentally calculating the lawsuit settlement. This wasn't just discrimination anymore. This was corporate suicide on live television. Patterson's voice came through the speaker, barely a whisper, "Ms. Matthews, I had no idea the acquisition had closed. It closed this morning. The board meeting to announce it is scheduled for 6 p.m. in Miami, which is why I needed to be on this flight." She looked around the cabin at the faces staring at her in shock. "But I wanted to see how my new airline treated passengers who didn't look like they belonged. Now I know." Derek was hyperventilating. "Ms. Matthews, please, I have 2 kids. A mortgage, I didn't know." "You didn't know who I was," Zara said quietly. "But you knew who you thought I was, and you treated me accordingly." Victoria Castellanos tried to speak. "Ms. Matthews, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding Zara said is your belief that money and status give you the right to treat other people as lesser human beings." Officer Johnson stepped forward. "Ms. Matthews, what would you like us to do?" Zara looked around the cabin, at Derek Walsh, who had assaulted her and stolen her property, at Victoria Castellanos, who had made racist demands and false accusations, at Captain Rodriguez, who had enabled discrimination without investigation, at the passengers who had recorded everything but initially done nothing to help. She thought about the 8-year-old girl who had cried as her father was dragged off a Skytech flight 3 months ago. She thought about every time she had been dismissed in boardrooms because of how she looked. She thought about every person who had been discriminated against by people who thought power meant the right to hurt others. "Officer Johnson, I want full documentation of every crime committed here. Assault, theft, false imprisonment, civil rights violations." "Yes, ma'am." She turned to Derek. "Mr. Walsh, you're terminated, effective immediately. You will be banned from employment in the aviation industry." Derek began to sob. "Please, Ms. Matthews, I need this job. You should have thought about that before you assaulted a passenger." She turned to Captain Rodriguez. "Captain, you enabled discrimination without investigation. You threatened removal based on assumptions rather than facts. You're terminated." Rodriguez's face crumpled. 20 years with this company. 20 years of creating a culture where this behavior was acceptable. She turned to Victoria. "Mrs. Castellanos, you made false medical claims, racist demands, and encouraged assault. You are banned from SkyTech Airlines for life." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You can't ban me. I'm a Platinum Elite member. I can't ban you from the old SkyTech. But I can ban you from my airline." Zara's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the cabin, "I've just received confirmation that the Federal Aviation Administration has ordered the immediate grounding of this aircraft pending investigation of civil rights violations." Captain Rodriguez looked confused. "The FAA, how did they," Mr. Patterson called them the moment he realized what was happening. "Discrimination complaints automatically trigger federal investigation when they involve aviation." She looked around the cabin one more time. "The plane isn't going anywhere until the FAA completes their review, which means everyone here gets to stay and think about what they witnessed today." Maya's live stream had reached 25,000 viewers. The comments were coming so fast they were unreadable. Kevin's Twitter thread had been shared by major news outlets. SkyTech discrimination was trending globally. And Zara Matthews, the woman they had tried to remove for not looking like she belonged, stood in the center of it all with the quiet dignity of someone who had just changed an entire industry. "Derek," she said quietly, "give me my phone back." Derek handed over the satellite phone with shaking hands. Zara dialed a number. "Security, this is Zara Matthews. I need a team at LaGuardia Gate 23. We have a situation that requires immediate documentation and evidence preservation." She hung up and looked at Officer Johnson. "Officer, thank you for recognizing discrimination when you saw it. When I rebuild this airline, I'd like to offer you a position as Director of Passenger Advocacy." Johnson's eyes widened. "Ma'am, that would be an honor. The honor is mine. You chose to do the right thing when others chose convenience." She turned to Maya, who was still live streaming. "Maya Wright, you documented everything when others were silent. I'd like to offer you a position as Director of Social Media Ethics." Maya nearly dropped her phone. "Are you serious? Completely serious. Truth-telling should be rewarded." She looked at Dr. Walsh. "Doctor, I saw you taking notes. Legal analysis, civil rights violations, multiple federal crimes, textbook discrimination case. Good. I'll need expert testimony when we reform this industry." Zara walked to the center of the aisle and faced the cameras that were recording everything. To everyone watching this, she said, "Remember what you saw today. Remember that discrimination happens when good people choose silence over justice. Remember that change comes not from policies or training, but from accountability." She paused, letting her words sink in. SkyTech Airlines will be rebuilt on a simple principle. Dignity is not negotiable. Respect is not earned through appearance or wealth. It's given freely to every human being who walks through our doors. Her phone rang again. She glanced at the caller ID and smiled. "That's the FAA. They have some questions for the crew that just discriminated against their new boss." As she answered the call, Derek Walsh sat on the floor of the first-class cabin, contemplating the complete destruction of his career. Victoria Castellanos stared at the seat she had stolen, realizing she had just become the face of airline discrimination. Captain Rodriguez calculated the federal pension he had just lost, and Zara Matthews began the conversation that would reshape aviation forever. The countdown was over. Accountability had arrived. "This is Senior FAA Investigator Patricia Coleman. I need to speak with the captain immediately." Zara held the satellite phone so everyone in the cabin could hear. The federal authority in Coleman's voice cut through the shocked silence like a knife. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his 20-year career crumbling in real time. "This is Captain Rodriguez. Captain, we've received reports of civil rights violations on your aircraft. I need your flight manifest crew roster and incident reports transmitted immediately. Investigator Coleman, there might be some misunderstanding. Captain, we have live stream footage of your crew discriminating against passengers based on race. There's no misunderstanding here. Maya Rodriguez held her breath as her Instagram Live audience reached 30,000 viewers. The comment section was moving too fast to follow, but the sentiment was clear. Justice was finally coming. Kevin O'Brien's Twitter thread had been shared by CNN, MSNBC, and The Washington Post. Major news outlets were scrambling to cover the story, breaking in real time. Furthermore, Coleman continued, "We've been informed that the discriminated passenger is the new owner of your airline. Is that accurate?" Captain Rodriguez looked at Zara, who nodded calmly. "Yes, ma'am. Ms. Matthews completed acquisition this morning. Then we have a situation where airline employees discriminated against their own CEO. This is unprecedented." Derek Walsh rocked back and forth on the cabin floor, muttering, I didn't know over and over. His 8-year career was over. His pension was gone. His future in aviation was destroyed. All because he couldn't see past a hoodie to the human being wearing it. Coleman's voice continued through the speaker. "Captain, your aircraft is hereby grounded pending federal investigation. No passengers may deplane. No crew may leave their stations. Federal investigators are en route. How long will Rodriguez be gone? As long as it takes to document every crime committed against Ms. Matthews." Victoria Castellanos finally found her voice. "This is outrageous. You can't hold passengers hostage because of a simple seating dispute." "Mrs. Castellanos," Zara said quietly, "you're not being held hostage. You're being held accountable." Officer Johnson stepped forward. "Ms. Matthews, while we wait for federal investigators, would you like me to arrest the individuals who committed crimes against you?" Derek looked up with panic in his eyes. "Arrest? You can't arrest me. I was doing my job." "Your job," Johnson said, "doesn't include assault, theft, or discrimination. Those are crimes regardless of your uniform." Officer Martinez pulled out her handcuffs. "Derek Walsh, you have the right to remain silent." "Wait." Derek scrambled to his feet. "Ms. Matthews, please, I have kids. I have a mortgage. I made a mistake." Zara looked at him steadily. "Derek, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to see a young black woman in casual clothes and decided she didn't belong. That wasn't an accident. That was prejudice. I can change. I can learn. Please don't press charges." Derek, 3 months ago, an 8-year-old girl watched her father get dragged off a SkyTech flight because gate agents didn't believe his ticket was real. That little girl cried as security officers manhandled her father. "Do you know why I bought this airline?" Derek shook his head. "Because of that little girl's tears. Because I got tired of watching people who look like me get humiliated by people who look like you." Zara's voice remained calm, but steel ran underneath it. "You had the chance to treat me with basic human dignity. You chose discrimination instead. Now you get to live with the consequences." Officer Martinez continued reading Derek his rights. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the reality hit him fully. He was being arrested, on live television, for discriminating against a billionaire. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. Victoria Castellanos watched in horror. "This is insane. Over a seating dispute, people will think I'm a racist." Dr. Walsh looked up from her legal notes. "Mrs. Castellanos, you demanded that a black passenger be removed to accommodate your preference. You claimed false medical accommodations. You encouraged discrimination. What would you call that? I never said anything about race. You said she didn't belong in first class. You said people like you. You suggested her ticket was probably stolen or fraudulent. What exactly did you mean by people like you if not race?" Victoria's face flushed red. She couldn't answer honestly without admitting racist assumptions. She couldn't lie convincingly with everything recorded. Maya's live stream audience had reached 50,000. Comments flooded in from viewers around the world. Justice for Zara. This is what accountability looks like. About time airlines faced consequences. That lady in leopard print is done. Kevin O'Brien was now live streaming on multiple platforms simultaneously. His view count had surpassed 100,000 as news outlets picked up the story. This is Kevin O'Brien reporting live from SkyTech Flight 847, where we're witnessing the most incredible reversal of power in aviation history. The passenger they tried to remove owns the airline. Zara's phone rang again. She glanced at the caller ID director, Sarah Hughes. Department of Transportation. This is Zara. Ms. Matthews, this is Director Hughes from the DOT. I'm calling to personally apologize for the discrimination you experienced and to assure you of our full investigation. Zara put the call on speaker again. The federal response was swift and overwhelming. Director Hughes, I appreciate your response, but I want more than investigation. I want broad-based change. What would you recommend mandatory bias training for all airline personnel? Federal oversight of discrimination complaints, criminal penalties for airline employees who violate civil rights, and immediate suspension of any airline where discrimination occurs. Hughes paused. Ms. Matthews, some of those recommendations would require congressional action. Then I'll testify before Congress. I'll use every dollar of my $8 billion net worth to ensure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Captain Rodriguez felt his world spinning apart. 20 years of service, perfect safety record, spotless career, all destroyed because he had made assumptions about a passenger based on appearance. Miss Matthews, he said desperately, I served 20 years in the Air Force. I'm not a racist. I made a mistake in judgment. Zara turned to face him. Captain, racism isn't just burning crosses and hate speech. Racism is a black passenger needing to prove she belongs while a white passenger's presence is never questioned. Racism is calling security on someone for refusing to give up something she paid for. Racism is seeing a hoodie and deciding the person wearing it doesn't matter. Rodriguez looked around the cabin at the faces watching him. Some sympathetic, some disgusted, all judging. I understand that now. Do you? Because 20 minutes ago you were ready to have me arrested for sitting in my own seat. What changed my identity or your conscience? Rodriguez couldn't answer. The honest response was that her identity had changed everything. If he had known she was a billionaire CEO, none of this would have happened, which proved her point perfectly. Zara looked at her watch. Ladies and gentlemen, federal investigators will be here in approximately 10 minutes. When they arrive, they'll interview every witness, collect all evidence, and document every crime committed against me. She walked to the center of the aisle and addressed the cameras directly. To everyone watching this around the world, remember what you've seen today. Discrimination doesn't happen because of policies or procedures. It happens because people make assumptions about who deserves respect based on appearance. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had built an empire from nothing. Today, those assumptions destroyed careers. Tomorrow, they'll rebuild an industry. Because I'm not just changing SkyTech Airlines, I'm changing the culture that made today possible. Maya held her phone, steady tears streaming down her face. This is the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed, she whispered to her audience. Kevin O'Brien was frantically typing updates as news broke in real time. Breaking FAA investigating SkyTech discrimination. CEO promises industry-wide reform. Federal criminal charges likely. Dr. Walsh was already drafting the civil rights lawsuit that would reshape aviation law. And Victoria Castellanos sat in seat 1A, clutching her purse, realizing that her demand for privilege had made her the face of discrimination on viral video watched by millions. As federal investigators boarded the aircraft, Zara Matthews stood in the cabin she owned, surrounded by the employees she was firing, facing the cameras that would carry her message around the world. Discrimination ends today, she said simply. Not with promises or policies, but with accountability. Real accountability. The investigation was beginning. The consequences were arriving, and the airline industry would never be the same. 6 months later, Miami International Airport. The Phoenix Air logo gleamed golden in the morning sun as Flight 1 prepared for departure from Miami to New York. The same route as Flight 847, the same aircraft completely transformed. Where SkyTech's cold, corporate branding once dominated warm colors and welcoming messages now invited passengers aboard. Good morning and welcome to Phoenix Air, where dignity flies with you. The gate agent's voice carried genuine warmth. Maria Santos, formerly of SkyTech, had kept her job through the transition. She was one of 12 employees who had demonstrated integrity during the federal investigation. Everyone else had been replaced. Zara Matthews walked through the terminal in a simple black dress and comfortable flats. No entourage, no fanfare, just another passenger heading to New York. But the difference was evident in every interaction. Ms. Matthews Maria called with a smile. "Welcome aboard Flight 1. Your seat is ready whenever you are." Zara paused at the podium. "Maria, what's the passenger experience like today?" "Perfect diversity training completion across all staff. 0 discrimination complaints since launch. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest in industry history." And the crew. Captain Jennifer Park, former Navy pilot. First Officer Roberto Valdez, 10 years experience. Senior Flight Attendant Marcus Johnson. Zara smiled. Marcus Johnson, the security officer who had recognized discrimination when others chose blindness. He had transitioned from security to flight operations, bringing his commitment to justice with him. "Any difficult passengers today?" Zara asked. "None. But we're ready if there are. New protocols ensure every passenger receives identical treatment regardless of appearance, accent, or assumptions." Inside the aircraft, the transformation was stunning. The cold, corporate first class had been replaced with warm, welcoming spaces. Economy seats were wider. Legroom was increased. The artificial hierarchy that had enabled discrimination was gone. Marcus Johnson greeted passengers with the bearing of someone who understood service meant respect for everyone. At 35, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had chosen principle over convenience. "Good morning," he said to each boarding passenger. "Welcome to Phoenix Air. How can we make your flight comfortable today? No assumptions, no judgments, no calculations about who mattered more." As passengers settled in, a familiar face appeared. Maya Rodriguez, now Director of Social Media Ethics, boarded with a small filming crew, not for viral content, but for documentation. Phoenix Air live-streamed select flights to demonstrate transparency in action. Maya Marcus greeted her warmly. "How are the numbers incredible? Phoenix Air has the highest Net Promoter Score in aviation. Customers aren't just satisfied, they're advocating for us." In seat 12A sat Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the civil rights attorney who had documented the original discrimination. She now served on Phoenix Air's Civil Rights Advisory Board, ensuring that legal protections matched operational reality. "The federal legislation passed last month," she told her seatmate. "The Zara Matthews Aviation Dignity Act requires bias training, complaint, transparency, and criminal penalties for discrimination. It's revolutionary." The legislation had been named after the woman who had transformed personal injustice into industry-wide reform. Other airlines had fought the requirements initially, but customer demand forced adoption. Passengers wanted to fly with companies that guaranteed dignity. As Flight 1 pushed back from the gate, Captain Jennifer Park addressed the cabin. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had earned respect through competence, not assumptions. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Phoenix Air Flight 1. Our flight time to New York will be 2 hours and 45 minutes. More importantly, our commitment to treating every passenger with equal dignity will last forever." She paused, letting the words resonate. Phoenix Air was born from tragedy but dedicated to triumph. We carry the dreams of every person who was told they didn't belong. Today, you all belong here. In the first-class cabin seat, 1A remained empty. Not because it wasn't sold, but because Zara had requested it stay vacant on the anniversary flights. A reminder of where discrimination led and where dignity began. Instead, Zara sat in 34F, the economy seat she had chosen 6 months ago. The same seat where she had decided to rebuild rather than destroy. The view from the back, she had learned, showed everything clearly. Her phone buzzed with a message from Derek Walsh. After his arrest and conviction, he had served community service and completed court-mandated bias training. His message was simple. Thank you for the second chance. Starting diversity training company to help others avoid my mistakes. You were right about accountability. Zara typed back. Accountability without opportunity for redemption is just revenge. Build something better. Another message came from Victoria Castellanos' completed sensitivity training. Working with civil rights organization now. Want to make amends. It had taken her 6 months to understand that privilege meant responsibility, not entitlement. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude, below America, spread out in all its complexity and contradiction. A nation still struggling with justice, but capable of change when courage demanded it. Marcus Johnson approached her seat. Ms. Matthews, how are you doing back here in economy, Marcus? I'm doing exactly where I belong, with the passengers who keep us flying. He smiled. The young girl from Flight 847 wrote another letter. She wants to be a pilot now. Says she learned that anyone can fly if they're brave enough to try. Zara's eyes misted. That 8-year-old girl, the one whose tears had motivated her to buy an airline, now dreamed of captaining aircraft herself. Personal transformation had become generational inspiration. Set up a scholarship fund, Zara said, for any child who faces discrimination but refuses to let it define their dreams. Already done. We're calling it the Phoenix Rising Scholarship. First recipients start flight training next month. As Flight 1 approached New York, Zara reflected on the journey from that painful day 6 months ago. Phoenix Air hadn't just replaced SkyTech. It had proven that business success and human dignity weren't competing values. They were complementary forces. Other airlines had initially resisted the changes, but customer preference drove adoption. Passengers chose companies that guaranteed respect. Stock prices reflected values alignment. The market rewarded moral leadership. The industry transformation was complete, not because of regulations or requirements, but because people demanded better, and companies delivered. The plane touched down at LaGuardia with the smoothness of expert piloting. As passengers gathered their belongings, the atmosphere was different from typical flights. People smiled at each other, said thank you to crew members, treated fellow travelers as human beings rather than obstacles. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York, Captain Park announced. Thank you for choosing Phoenix Air, where every passenger matters equally. Zara was among the last to deplane. She wanted to see every interaction, witness every moment where dignity was chosen over discrimination. At the gate, a young black woman in a hoodie approached the podium with some nervousness. The gate agent smiled warmly, checked her boarding pass efficiently, and said, "Welcome aboard. Your seat is ready whenever you are. No additional questions, no suspicious looks, no assumptions." Zara watched with quiet satisfaction. That young woman would never know that her smooth boarding experience had been paid for with public humiliation, federal investigation, and industry transformation. But she would benefit from it for the rest of her life. As Zara walked through the terminal toward ground transportation, her satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed President's Office, Civil Rights Commission. She answered with curiosity. "This is Zara. Ms. Matthews, this is President Biden's office. The President would like to present you with the Presidential Medal of Freedom for your contributions to civil rights in aviation. Zara paused in the busy terminal, the highest civilian honor in America for refusing to give up an airline seat. I'm honored by the consideration, she said finally, but the real heroes are the people who filmed the discrimination, testified truthfully, and demanded change. They deserve recognition. The President anticipated you might say that. He'd like to honor all of you together. A ceremony recognizing that justice requires witnesses, courage requires community, and change requires accountability. Zara smiled. Now that sounds appropriate. She hung up and looked around LaGuardia Airport, the same terminal where her humiliation had begun 6 months ago. The same crowds of travelers, but now protected by laws that guaranteed dignity regardless of appearance. Her phone buzzed with a text from the young girl whose father had been discriminated against, Ms. Matthews. I got accepted to aviation school. Thank you for showing me that people like us can fly planes too. Zara typed back. You were always capable of flying. I just helped clear the runway. She walked toward the exit, just another passenger in comfortable clothes heading home. Behind her, Phoenix Air Flight 2 was boarding for the evening departure to Miami. In front of her, a country was slowly learning that dignity wasn't a privilege to be earned, but a right to be protected. The transformation was complete, not just of an airline, but of an industry, not just of policies, but of principles. Justice, it turned out, didn't require shouting or anger. It required persistence, courage, and the simple refusal to accept discrimination as normal. As Zara stepped into the New York evening, she carried with her the satisfaction of promises kept. The 8-year-old girl could now dream of being a pilot. The young woman in the hoodie could board planes without fear. Discrimination had consequences, and dignity had defenders. Sometimes, changing the world started with refusing to give up your seat. Thank you for watching this story of dignity, justice, and transformation. If this moved you, remember that change begins with witnesses who refuse to stay silent. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look. Subscribe for more stories of courage conquering prejudice. Share this reminder that everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look. The next time you see discrimination happening, remember Zara Matthews. Remember that staying silent enables injustice, but speaking up creates change. Hit that notification bell so you never miss stories that matter. Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone underestimates, and sometimes the person sitting quietly in the corner is the one who owns the building. If this story inspired you to stand up for what's right, drop a comment below. Share your own experiences. Let's build a community where dignity isn't negotiable and respect isn't earned through appearance. Subscribe now because justice never goes out of style, and neither do stories that remind us all to do better.